concerned, as I know you two are, and I think there's universal consensus that there's a crisis there, but I'm wondering how would you characterize the crisis? And either of you can start, maybe Jan to start.
Well,
because your article is in a sense about that.
Okay, I mean, regarding whether there is a universal consensus, I don't know whether current authorities in Poland actually would agree that there is a crisis. Well, I think that they would say that there is a stalemate, but I don't think that they will call it a deep crisis. They
well, I more or less mean people like us.
Yes, yes, but it's worth like repeating that they constantly use the rhetoric that there is that they try to fix things that have been destroyed or that have been destroyed. It's too much. It's a little bit too much, but that have been
damage has been done. Damaged
by a previous government. And one of the things that they try to do is to fix, quote unquote, constitutional court. Right, and there have been a series of laws that were supposed to do just that, and the last iteration of that was the law that was pretty much universally declared in Poland by all legal experts, by Polish ombudsman, and so on and so forth, as incapacitating the constitutional court. The Constitutional Court, when was reviewing this this law, was not relying on this law, despite the fact that there is a presumption of constitutionality of laws, right? But the Constitutional Court argued, and all the judicial associations were also suggesting that the court should rely on the Constitution while reviewing that law. And the court ruled it unconstitutional, but the government refused to acknowledge it. I don't remember right now whether it was the Prime Minister or the Minister of Justice, but one of them said that it wasn't the Constitutional Court that actually made that decision, it was just judges who were sitting over coffee, right? So it's basically the crisis is, on the one hand, the conflict between the judiciary and the executive and legislative that are
and the society then
and the parts of society, right? Because this is another facet of this crisis. I believe that it's an increasing social polarization, which, well, I don't know where it will lead, but we witness in Poland more and more aggressive rhetoric, unfortunately on both sides, but mostly on the side of the supporters of the government and government itself, right?
So although it does look as though it's a constitutional crisis, or it looks as though it's a legal crisis, because this is what the struggle is around, the dismantling of the highest court, our own Supreme Court, which is to check how the government is doing and how society is doing. I think actually this is much of a deeper crisis. And I have to say that I reread your piece, and I think it's already in your piece. It's just that those things are not named. And I think the deeper crisis that I'm talking about has to do with the way in which people are looking, are judging the present, looking into the future, but above all looking into the past. Mm-hmm. And I think that that kind of crisis, which is mental, intellectual, if you wish, philosophical, broadly understood, and I'm not talking about professional philosophers, but the way people think about life in common, I think that kind of crisis looks to me, even on the basis of your piece, I'm not talking about the tons of things that I read in between, as a counter-revolutionary discourse, or rather practices and actions taken on the part of the government, and it has to do with an effort to invalidate almost everything which had happened after 1989, and I think that's why I say this is it is so tactically or strategically they touched on the most vulnerable moment just after the elections because of what was going on at that time with the Constitutional Tribunal. But I think it is the vision of what this country is going to be about, or what it was about, and particularly the vision of what had happened in the last 25 years. And when I was thinking about it, when I was reading your text, I was, perhaps because of my other readings recently, I was thinking about the reaction to the French Revolution, which had its dark moments, and our revolution didn't actually have any dark moments. The reaction to the French Revolution of the major intellectual of the counter-revolutionary Joseph de Maistre, who was very, very specific in all his writings, that there is an absolute need of absolute power, that absolute power is to be vested in the state. That's what you said in your piece as well. So the state is to be the decider, and all other powers that including the society, I'm not even talking about it, are of no use. So there is this very strong proponent, and we have it very clearly in our leader, of the strong state which starts with the moment of the elections, right? Because otherwise it was weakened, it was corrupted, it was whatever the reasons were. So that's one thing. Then the other thing, there's this thing about organic power, which is related to the state and this new post-revolutionary and even pre-revolutionary times, I believe. So there is this power in the people which is kind of strangely spiritual, clearly not rational. It has to do with a lot of exploiting emotions, people's emotions related to things which hurt. And then the third part is the aggression directed at already established institutions, right? Institutions which make it impossible for the new vision, counter-revolutionary vision, to take place. The first one is, of course, the legal institutions, but as you know, the media have been already getting, since you've written the piece, it really went much ahead. People have been fired. There is a small margin of the private media, of the privatized media, or I should say not non-state media. The state media had been kind of reverted. So there was this moment, there was this process. I was talking about activities and practices of purging, which are taking place all over, and it has to do with this kind of reactionary stand, which you can see in the party of the counter-revolutionary French Revolution. Except our revolution didn't have Thermidor. We had a peaceful revolution. People had established.
It even seems to be the complaint that it was too peaceful. That too much care was taken to not have revolutionary
and too decentralized. And of course there was a treason at the very seeds of it, because it was peaceful, because it was organized around the table. So that kind of a reasoned, consensual agreement cannot produce high spiritual values that suddenly we are all about it. And therefore we do have to, and this is really exactly what both, and I'm not going to mention another author because it will really sound very horrible or harsh if I would say, so I will stay with de Maistre. The other one is a certain Duce of the 20th century, who said that it is the state that generates nation. The state power generates nation, not other.
But it's a very, very, it's not just the state in this situation. It's it's connected to a conception of the nation and Polishness. I
have to say that I really looked I was there, so to speak, and I don't want to go this direction because I think those are all those kind of movements which really, what I call the kind of darkness of the vision, the darkness of this counter-revolutionary vision. It really is partly supported and generated by those movements. But you know what? If you look at the language, it is not as much about the nation, but it's really about this about this very power, really Schmittian, it should not be touched.
But
Touching the
why,
state...
why is this, these holders of state power more authentic than the previous holders of state power?
Well, I mean, I think that I mean, it has to do with what Elżbieta already mentioned about the tainted birth of the Third Republic, right?
There was a sin at the beginning,
yeah,
right?
The original sin of the Third Republic.
I know
yes.
something about Poland. You two know a lot about Poland, but the people who are joining us, some of them don't know very much at all. So let's just clarify. First of all, there's a crisis right now of concern to the citizens of Poland because there seems to be a crisis in legitimacy.
And democracy is being dismantled.
And it appears that democracy is being dismantled, though from each side it's viewed, the demon is different. And then Poland is part of Europe, and the European Union, and observers from the outside, including journalists in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, so conservative and relatively liberal American newspapers, are concerned, as are many, as is the American government. And there's this immediate crisis that there's the equivalent of the American Supreme Court says one thing is the law, and the Parliament and the President says something else, and there's just an impasse. And whether that's the immediate crisis.
More than an impasse. Let me add one additional detail which appeared a few days ago, but actually today it was reiterated by the Minister of Justice, who is at the same time Prosecutor General, right? So the Minister of Justice, when sent a letter to a Constitutional Court, saying that if the court continues operations as if this fixing law was invalid, then they will prosecute judges of the Constitutional Court for abuse of power and violation of the rule of law.
The state was prosecuted.
The state will prosecute.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And the Prosecutor General, which is a Minister of Justice at the same time, has the power to initiate any kind of investigation right now, intervene personally in any kind of investigation.
Which means it will suspend the actual existence of the functioning of it, right? Because what had happened in between, which is perhaps important to say, in between Jacek's piece and today, let's say, there was the Constitutional Court actually issued a statement.
Right.
Yep.
Why won't you say, which then, the statement which said that those things are illegal, basically, those actions on the side of the state.
But the government refuses to publish it.
To publish it, meaning it didn't become public. So the society, part of the protest was to publicize the law, which is actually a law, yeah.
So that's a severe point of conflict right now. But then we ask ourselves, how did Poland get to this point? And then you're discussing the fact that it maybe has to do with an ideology of, a very conservative ideology of state power, and on the other hand, it has to do with a deep doubt about the nature of the transition from
suspicions. I don't like the word doubt.
Deep suspicions with conspiracy theories that rather than there being a break between 1989 and post-89, that in fact there was a continuity.
Yes, basically this is...
So really questioning the moment of democratic, what many of us, including the three of us, see a moment of democratic reconstitution of Polish political life.
And ironically, getting very close to what is kind of geopolitically being criticized, being former Soviet Union, but coming very, very close to what is emerging out of the former Soviet Union as the major kind of illiberal power in Europe, which is Putin. Putin's
Yeah,
power,
and-
right? So the closeness of the,
And
the
you also have,
irony
I
of
mean,
that
one
is-
of the things that I find, now I'm going to stop being a moderator, one of the things I find really amazing is that, yes, it's the state, but it's the party state. So,
Yes.
so the power is not
That's
in state position,
Yes.
but it's actually party position.
Yes, and I mean, it has to do with this serious suspicion, or actually the statement of illegitimacy of the Third Republic, right? The Third Republic, I mean, the original
1989 to 2015, right?
I believe that the idea of the substituting state with the party, right, has to do with, as I said, with the deep questioning of the legitimacy of the Third Republic, right?
Right.
I mean, the first issue was, or is, I mean, on the part of the government, why on earth, if it was actually a democratic transition, why on earth members of the previous regime were actually invited to participate in that transition? Why Poland was not
Communionized immediately, right?
Decommunized.
Yes.
That's hard.
Right.
Why decommunism didn't happen in Poland as
Yes,
soon as it happened in some other countries?
Decommunization, exactly, right? This is one thing, and another thing is that, and it has.
But let's point out for people who don't know the history of Poland that this was a very intentional attempt on the part of the new authorities in relation interacting with the old authorities to actually have a peaceful transition and
Yes.
to avoid the tragedies of revolutionary justice.
But can I do something more? There was unimaginable up to then that any kind of transition could have happened. I mean, the Round Table was pushing as much as possible the limits of imagination that anything in that bloc could happen. So, I mean, I think that this is not the fact that once it happened, it opened up various spaces in other post-communist countries. People began to run from East Germany to West Germany. The borders had opened in Hungary and so on. But that was unimaginable prior to that table.
Right.
So, and I think that it's somewhat completely, we are trying to write about it, but it's completely kind of buried under the table, yeah?
Yes, but the fact that the post-communists or the members of the old regime were invited to that round table.
But who would be talking with each other? Opposition itself?
Because
Well,
the
We're
communists
forced to
still-
talk.
This is I mean, obviously.
I mean, excuse me, Michnik talking to Kuronian talking to Macierewicz.
Well,
He was there too, excuse
Yes,
me.
that's-
And Kaczynski. And what the hell would they actually come up
So-
with for the four of them?
Well, I don't know
I'm
if
sorry.
I don't know if it would be actually possible. Maybe then, but no.
But there was that kind of round table. It's not a round table. It's a regular table. We sit around the table and
or
talk.
two separate tables as we see right now, right? But I mean, this was one thing. Another thing, I guess, is that I mean the intellectual inspirations of Jarosław Kaczyński, who actually, I mean, from what I know, obviously, I'm not the head of Jarosław Kaczyński.
So he's the head
the leader
of
of the party, right?
So he is the master
He is
of
the
that
mastermind.
change, of that
So
change.
the Law and Justice Party, which now has a majority in
Majority.
Parliament and control and the presidency
And the presidency, right?
for the first time in
for the
post.
fir-
Yes.
Yes, right. And the leader of the party is not occupying any significant state office. He is just a member of parliament, and yet he concentrates all the power, decision-making power.
In his
Actually,
hands.
So
in his hands.
it's really just like the communist times when it was control of the
By
party.
the first
and-
secretary of the party and not by the prime
Yeah,
minister or president.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you. Nobody put the finger on that, yes.
yes, but this is. I mean, the
Central committee.
I mean, but this is one of the scary things about the situation in Poland, that you have the extra institutional center of power that is absolutely constitutionally unaccountable, right?
In the situation where we still have democracy.
Supposedly, right?
We
Which
do.
is
Do you
Well-
still have democracy?
well, this is
I think we do.
I mean,
I think there are two questions. Do you have democracy? And if there is some semblance of democracy, is it liberal democracy?
well, I don't.
It's certainly not social democracy.
It's certainly it's not social democracy. It wasn't supposed to be a social democracy from the beginning.
Right.
But well, maybe with the exception of few people who actually want it. But it's not. I mean, this is not the issue. I think that what actually the current government is doing is trying to not only make a shift from liberal democracy to illiberal democracy, but generally from democracy where the decisions are fundamental decisions are actually made by the people to a kind of plebiscitarism where the elections or referenda give mandate to the powers.
So one can have many criticisms of what happened over that 25-year period, but what's extraordinary is that a very different type of liberal democratic regime actually seemed to solidify. Now, as I read you, Jan, you interpret the situation similarly to Elżbieta in the sense that you see the way the government is now acting is not simply being about one law or another, but in fact that the regime is a counter-revolution is occurring right now. A fundamental regime change is being instituted.
Yes,
that's what I said about counter-revolution. That was actually written in his text. It's just not named.
I know. So you might want to add something to what I'm about to say.
Yes, I just want to add that this. I mean, I didn't name it counter-revolution because I mean, one of the reasons is that I prefer to call it a regime change. Maybe it's just a preference for the I mean for the name of what is happening. But I think that we agree that what is happening is basically. I mean, first of all, it's a full-fledged attack on the rule of law. If we accept that the independence and functionality of the constitutional court and therefore checks and balances is at the basis of the rule of law, but it also entails, I mean, this regime change, fundamental shift of power. And concentration of power in certain offices. I mean, right now we had a merger of Minister of Justice and Prosecutor General. Prosecutor General can intervene in any, can start any investigations, can intervene in any investigations, can tell which directions any kind of investigations needs to need to take, and he also threatened the Constitutional Court if it is insubordinate to the government. There will be prosecutions. But there are also
I mean, this is immense, right? I mean, let's just kind of underscore it. I mean, it's
not just a regime change.
You know, just for the American audience, this means that
unless you're talking about the system change, a change of the system.
The secretary, the attorney general has the power to actually declare a decision by the Supreme Court as invalid, and if it persists in
put them to prison.
they could be put into prison.
To take them to court.
So this is, you know, the crystallization of the crisis in a very concrete way.
Yes, and this is one facet of it. Another facet is taking of the institutions like civil service, which is the bureaucracy. Earlier it was before changes introduced by the current government. One of the requirements was no party affiliation. Right now, this is absolutely fine. Plus, another requirement was professionalism. Right now, this requirement is dismissed. So
the same about party. It's not just fine. You have to be from this party in order to get a position. Yeah.
Well, it's not written in the law, but in practice, this is how it works, right? And you know, the media has been taken over. The public media, the institution that supervises public media, has been changed, and it's right now under direct supervision of the of the Minister of Finance. And there have been purges. Like, I don't really think that this is understatement if we say that there have been purges, politically motivated purges of journalists in the.
But
in the
also
public
civil
media.
servants,
And also
which were
civil
completely
servants.
apolitical. You know?
Yes, and the idea about civil service was that they should not be political. They should be just bureaucrats.
So as an expert in the good old bad days, it strikes me that what was constituted after 1989 was a purposive reversal of what existed before 1989. So the basis of communist authority and power, legitimacy, was actually the system of nomenclatura.
Yeah.
So you had a position in the party apparatus, which then guaranteed a job as a civil servant. So civil servant was the civil service was actually determined by the party state. So
Yes.
What we're seeing now is maybe a regime change, but in fact sociologically a kind of counter-revolution in the sense, or a revolution. Things are being turned in a fundamental way, and it's not just a question of the state, but it's actually penetrating the whole social order.
Yes. I mean, I do agree. I mean, maybe I don't agree with the word counter-revolution.
Yeah, that doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, yes, that's true that it's penetrating. I mean, it's not just the state institutions. I mean, it's also building another hierarchy of power, which is more
Look,
important.
it's not counter-revolution because we didn't have revolution. We have this interesting, peaceful but yet fundamental change, and that peaceful but fundamental change is being now reversed.
Peacefully, fundamentally being reversed, or relatively peacefully, but we'll see for how long.
Yes.
And that leads me to wonder. I see on my Facebook page and read in the newspaper about huge demonstrations that are appearing in Poland, and real resistance to this change. And I'd like to have a sense of or understand, with your help, how effective you think this is. And how and where does what kind of support do these demonstrations have? You mentioned earlier about the fact that the society is deeply polarized, and what I fear is that it's one pole that is protesting, and then there's this other pole that is actually supportive of the changes. Maybe the people who voted in peace.
I think that you were asking him, so I didn't.
No, either one.
I have my opinion about that.
Yeah, so I'd like to hear both of your opinions.
I actually think that that this particular phenomenon, which emerged immediately after the elections, and the articulation of this phenomenon through the attack on different institutions, democratic institutions, or institutions of democratic state, have provided an extraordinary lesson for Poles. I think that kind of taking for granted, as people do in very old democracies.
Yeah, the United States.
The legal framework, and sometimes also unwritten political culture, so to speak, environment, has suddenly. I mean, people. I did 25 years. It's a life of an entire generation. I mean, yes, people were born and went to, but they never thought that it could happen. So for me, this is an example of extraordinary lesson provided for young people, provided for people who have forgotten, because the democracy had been kind of institutionalized, professionalized. There were professional politicians. There were problems with it, of course, and people got tired of it and even aesthetically displeased often with it. Yet, if you look at the situation in Poland right now, I mean, or recently, the level of corruption was actually going down very dramatically. The level of poverty and unemployment was going down. I mean, in comparison with other parts of the.
Of course, but people don't live in Poland thinking about, well, how much better I have than Bulgaria or Hungary or Czech.
They don't
Czech
think about it. No, you're right.
I mean,
I'm not talking about
from the outside, it's clear that there's something fundamentally wrong
what I
here,
wanted only to say that those things work, and people took them for granted. And people were displeased. Some people were displeased and did it because they thought, okay, I'm going to show that I have actually something to say. So they voted for the rock man called Cookies. Or some people voted for Law and Justice, as it seemed as though that it might be good to change the government. And the lesson provided by that would not have happened would people not directly feel how it began to hurt. Women last week began to hear it, to feel it very directly when the total ban on abortion. So
it's pretty bad before, from a point of view of pro-choice.
So in other words, it's not just illegal. So it's not just a constitutional tribunal, right?
No.
So it's a ban on abortion. In Poland, abortion law, anti-abortion law is incredibly harsh. To say that even in the case of the life of a woman, or the rape case, or a fetus to be born with some incredible abnormalities, that it's not possible to say that. I mean, this is much too much, and young women, and not just young women, went on the streets, and and this is a way. I mean, you voted for that. I mean, It's a way of thinking about one's own obligations as a citizen.
See,
and
I'm
I think
sure
that may not have been without that. I mean, it's a dramatic. It's a kind of wake up.
It's not only about young people. I mean, it's also the
I
case.
think it
It's
is
also
not,
the case
yeah.
that in Poland, the kind of political spectrum is from center right to far right. And
with the exception of some extra parliamentary left,
right,
unfortunately.
Right, and
because they were
in the European sense of liberal, but in the pro-market sense, liberalism of the pro-market sort was very much the order of the day, and lots of people suffered from the injustices of a radical market economy.
I don't know about that, but I'm
you
actually
don't think so?
No, I do think so, but I think because of the incredible influence of the mitigating power, economic power brought by the grants from European Union, people didn't actually.
Right.
The unemployment. So in other words, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that they actually didn't feel it as much as they would have.
Yes.
As they would have. This is not
but again,
to say
people don't experience the
comparative things, right? So for example, when you go to the countryside, it's extraordinary, and yet what had happened is that the farmers went and voted for Law and Justice. They, without realizing that one of the first orders will be of the Law and Justice to fire a whole group of large 1,000 or something of civil servants who are in charge of dispersing the grants from European Union to farmers.
Right.
And now, new group of people were assigned to do that, but they don't know anything. And this is an important and vulnerable moment to putting seeds in the ground. I mean, it's just beginning of the season, and there is no money, and the money are going to be defrozen in June. Now that's much too late for the farmers. So what I'm trying to say is that the people will see the relationship between one and the government. This is not neoliberalism, because of course neoliberal think people suffered, but I think
use
not.
The term neoliberalism.
But I did. Yeah, I did. No, this sharply. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to go back to the question of polarization, and then go back to the question of social inequalities, or the economic motivation for voting. Right? When it comes to the social polarization, what was surprising actually was that young people voted for the current government.
That's right.
For the party that is right now in government, right? And I agree that some of them actually did not appreciate. Well, I don't want to use that word.
Took it for granted.
Were born into democracy and took it for granted, right? But at the same time, there was some research done by social psychologists that says that because of the one of the hypotheses is that because of the socialization under market individualism, they were looking for experience of community somewhere else, not in like immediate social ties, but in a more general national community. And national community in Eastern Europe has a meaning of it's a kind of a spiritual, mystic thing, right? Where you
That's the best.
that you're connected to it through, I don't know, whatever, like a feeling in your heart. But another part of that research also said that young people, or some of the young people, actually feel absolutely fine with quite authoritarian government. Mm-hmm. Because as they are socialized under the market individualism, they perceive. They see the success as a manifestation of individual strength, and for them, this is my interpretation. Jarosław Kaczyński, right, who disregards the rulings of Constitutional Court, who disregards the opposition, who is ruling with firm hand, is somebody they long for, right? This is the leader that actually feeds into their needs of strong power holder, right? And this is not. This cannot be the whole explanation, right? I mean, that there are some. I also read certain things that suggest that there was also a so-called social electorate that voted for law and justice, and without support of people who were economically disenchanted with what has been happening in Poland. Law and justice wouldn't have been elected.
Huge impact of church.
That's true. But
on the electorate, very often, actually, really, and I think that there is this electorate, and the people who really feel squeeze, I think, are older people, retirees who were not and those people certainly voted for peace.
So it's the young and the old,
but also young people who are employed on precarious contracts, and they see. I see as well, right? That there was. I remember, like the amazing in the economic. Betterment, this is how you say it, right? Like improvement of like living conditions of my family, my parents, and it was for a long time I thought that this would be like I would go on the same trajectory, right? Mm-hmm. It will be it, and there was a ceiling at some point, right? And people, I guess, felt disappointed not because they didn't. They were poor or they got kicked by the visible leg of the market.
This is a classic example of crisis of rising expectations.
Exactly, right?
Exactly. So expectation for improvement. I'm thinking a little bit about this country and about Donald Trump, and it seems to me that there's an analogy. The kinds of people that support Donald Trump, the kinds of people who support peace and their authoritarian yearnings. But then, I think I'm seeing in Poland also a tension, because you vote for a party for a whole host of reasons, and then it governs. It selects its mandate, and then. So the society is polarized. Some people continue to support the party because it selected the part of the mandate that they support. But then,
and they're strong.
And they really support it. But then other people, didn't actually realize that this was going to lead to censorship. They didn't realize that actually the courts were going to be fundamentally challenged. They realized they voted for them, but they didn't realize that pretty rough anti-abortion laws were going to become unprecedentedly rough, uniquely rough.
They didn't realize that people are going to be hired, and not hired on the basis of competition, but on the basis of party.
Exactly. So that leads to people on the streets, and polarization, and I wonder how you see the balance of power, and do you see any way out of this, the present circumstance? I mean, I have my opinion. Are we okay?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, looks good.
Okay.
So
You're following it now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that that this new, rather extraordinary movement, which emerged almost immediately when the constitutional crisis emerged, which was really the very end of November, the beginning of December.
So committee to
committee code. KOD, Committee in Defense of Democracy, which reverberates the Committee of Defense for Defense of Workers,
which was a key
anti-communist, initiative, which around which later on Solidarity in a way organized itself. But so I think that this movement, which is now on the streets, is almost as diverse as the first Solidarity was. It's just that first Solidarity had to be organized through their workplaces, because that was the only way that the government at that time agreed actually to have, because of the signing of the Gdansk agreement.
But the society was significantly organized around workplace. That's part of the
and it
order
was
of
clear,
things.
so there were those demands in Gdansk, and that brought them together. And then there were demands put up later on by the Solidarity Union that kind of organized. Yet, when you think about it, it was very diverse, and it was in fact divided. And I think now there is a similar situation. I think it is similar situation. It is people are expecting various things. Some people are there, as Jan said, because they want to be together. There is the sense of atomized society, liberalism. It's a cold philosophy which doesn't provide home. It's a world very often of walls, divides people, private, public, this, that, and suddenly here you are together, and that's important. It's a question of togetherness, and the question that there is somewhat they are being cheated, but I think that and it is not. And I think that the leaders of that movement completely realize that it's not a movement ready to create a political platform. It is a civic movement which is give us our rights back. That's it. We had rights and they are disappearing.
And they're being taken away. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, this is. I do agree. I mean, I think I'm a little bit less enthusiastic about this movement, not because
you have not been there, and I just came back, and I was very depressed about.
There may be some
I'm joking. Yeah.
No, I mean, but my lack of I'm not saying that my lack of enthusiasm, but my the note of skepticism I have is that the movement is yes, it brings different people together, but its platform is. Yes, it's give us our rights back, but it's much more. In fact, it's much more negative. It's anti-government right now, right? So the leaders of that movement. I mean, it took them a while to take a stand regarding the proposed abortion law, right?
A week, or
right?
maybe 4 days. Yeah, because the leader was here actually. That's why.
This was it was far too long, right? There are obviously, I mean, on the part of the government, there are accusations that the movement is being steered by interest groups that benefited from the previous government, which is not entirely true. However, we know that there are people from the previous government that go and demonstrate, which is fine, which is good. The thing is that
that's petty.
No, but movements like this have a challenge because they're facing a disciplined party, And how do you do something positive facing a disciplined party when you're actually made up of politically diverse
you don't
groups?
come here, and unfortunately they do that. Yeah, they're exclusive sometimes. Yeah,
Sometimes they are exclusive.
that's not good.
The thing is that, in my opinion, what I lack in that movement is first of all, or just one thing is we know that pre-Kaczynski Poland, let me put it this way, was not perfect, right? And yet there is no acknowledgement that that there were structural reasons or reasons why people decided to vote for Kaczynski, right? And this is my concern.
Don't you think there were cultural reasons? Do you think structural? I think it is all this feely,
I think
emotional shit.
I think that they were both. I think that they were.
Okay, so spell that out, and then I'll ask you what you think is going to happen next, and then we will call it.
Because I go for the movie.
I think that there are two weaknesses, right? One is actually three weaknesses. One is that the movement is mostly right now concentrated around the Constitutional Court, the issue of the Constitutional Court, and if, for God forbid, current opposition makes a deal with Kaczynski regarding some kind of a new, more legitimate fixing of the Constitutional Court crisis, then the movement will lose a huge part of its ideological legitimacy. The other thing is that it's mostly negative, and it takes it a while to include certain issues that are normal for liberals and left-wing people in the West. Or in other parts of the world, let me put it this way, like the abortion issues. And unfortunately, there are efforts on the part of people who are not to use the rhetoric of the current government, of the existing elites who are trying to hijack the movement, right, or benefit or surf the wave of the movement, right, and I think that but again, right, the movement itself will not depose Kaczynski because, as you said, Elżbieta, it's not ready to become a political platform, to become a political party, right, and I
think they don't want to, from what we know. Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know whether hopefully or not, because and this is my very pessimistic note. I am not sure that there is a political party that actually can challenge sufficiently Kaczynski right now, or that actually there is a party that I would like to support to challenge the Kaczynski right now, except some extra-parliamentary small left, right? Yeah.
So you're optimistic.
I'm always the sucker for hope, so I cannot stop having.
And I'll share that optimism because the kind of social creativity and imagination that animated solidarity is actually observable in COT.
I also think that this is just one sentence on that this is that because of the movement, in the first place, it's a long march.
Yes.
And if it and we should let them have time, and do stuff. And I think for me, it's an opportunity for people, for citizens, everybody to relearn democracy and what does it mean to be a citizen and how to live in democracy. So I think that is an opportunity. Elections are in 4 years. And he's not going to win.
A little rebellion now and then is a good thing, to quote Thomas Jefferson.
Thank you both.